Well, my friend, we are in a brand new series, and this one is with my friend Marc Ronick, who is an absolute genius when it comes to the podcasting space. He has been in the industry, he has seen a lot, and you are going to learn so much from him across these 4 episodes. Before we get into all of the good stuff, I will just caveat and say this right now. If you want to binge all 4 of these episodes, go to my Patreon and click on the button that will give you access to do so, because we release all 4 episodes at the beginning of every single month so that you can go in and access everything all at the same time and just really dive in and soak in the conversation. So in today's episode, we are talking all about the podcasting mindset. This is such a crucial piece of the podcasting journey because I don't think we all pay all that much attention to the mindset side of this and how important it actually is. Now, before you roll your eyes, I really want you to stick around for the ride here. We're going to be talking about some really great stuff. We're talking about why mindset, especially when it comes to podcasting, is your most key and most important asset. We're talking about some of the biggest challenges and blocks that you may face in your podcasting journey. And we're talking about how to shift your mindset to create more opportunity with your show, with your guests, and as a host. So, joining me for this conversation is my friend Marc. He is a podcasting veteran. He has over 17 years of experience, and he has a passion for empowering podcasters to turn their vision into reality. From launching his first fantasy football podcast in 2005 to founding the innovative Next Gen Podcaster membership with Nick that you would have seen in the first series, the very first series that we did on this podcast, which we're also going to talk about in our interview as well. His journey has been marked by an array of successful ventures. He hosts a popular comedy podcast, The Mark and Lowell Show, alongside his childhood friend that has accumulated over 1 million downloads. He's also the co-founder of Realm Network and Ironic Media, and he continues to help independent podcasters build their brands and reach wider audiences. As you're going to hear in our conversation and throughout this series, we're going to be talking about Next Gen Podcaster. And in this program, him and Nick bring podcasters cutting edge AI tools and expert advice to help creators really tap into AI and technology to leverage their podcast. So for today's episode, we are focusing more on the mindset side, but I did want to set the stage for you a little bit. Thank you so much for being here. Please review the podcast. Your words of affirmation are a love language for me. So if you want to tell me how the podcast is doing, how much you're enjoying the content, and what you want to hear more of, leaving a review is the best way that you can do that. And also sharing it with another podcaster who needs to hear this conversation. I would be so grateful. So thank you for joining me for this conversation. Let's get into it with my friend Marc. Marc, thank you so much for joining me on As It Relates to Podcasting. I am really excited for our conversation today. Oh, I'm very excited for our conversation today.
Well, why? We speak every single morning, Monday through Friday. There's nothing... I would think, if anything, you're kind of dreading it. You've had enough of me, haven't you?
Not a chance. I will take any opportunity to talk to you, especially talk to you about what we're going to talk about today, which is podcasting mindset and all things podcasting, and also all things life related, because I feel like you and I align on a lot of different things when it comes to mindset, the way we view the world, the spiritual side, like all of it. So
yep.
Yeah, so it's such a treat for me to have you on my show today, because I think we're going to really be able to vibe and give our listener right now a really impactful message.
I agree with you. I'm looking forward to it. I don't get to do this very often, talk more about the mindset side of things, even though I think that that's the most important thing. And unfortunately, especially with new podcasters, I feel like they're always looking for the answer, right? They're looking for the magic pill that's going to make everything amazing and successful. And, usually they're looking for, how do I grow my podcast? How do I make money with my podcast? All of these things. And those are the sexy things, right? Those are the exciting things. So it's frustrating to me because I believe it does all start with your mindset. And if your mindset is in the right place, you can accomplish all of those things that you want to accomplish, right? But unfortunately, when I put out, say, content about it on social media, it tends to fall flat because those people, they're just looking for the magic pill, the magic answer, and they don't want to accept the fact sometimes that it does all start with mindset.
Do you think it's the word mindset that might deter people?
I think it can be, and I think also some of the buzzwords that follow mindset can also be that deterrent for some people because they don't want to they don't want to believe that part. So yeah, anything like that, when you get into imposter syndrome and things like that, people tend to say that's not what it is. I just need to know, how do I do the steps to make all the money?
And it's like, well, actually the first step is you need to turn inwards.
Yes, exactly.
You know, one of the things too that I think about when it comes to mindset in general, and this is a rule that not even a rule, but it's just like a framework that I have always followed ever since I first heard about it. And it's Simon Sinek's Start With Why. So when I first heard about him and when I first heard about this concept of starting with why, it really triggered me in a good way. Like it hit me in a good way because I was like, this is absolutely genius. And, you know, before I was doing podcast production, I was doing life coaching and all kinds of different stuff. And even in those programs that I had created back then, it was still everything always starts with why. It is always rooted in the bigger purpose. And I would love to know if you align on that as well.
As a matter of fact, I align on it so well. And here we go already with our more spiritual side of things.
We're diving in.
I was looking at do you use that app Time Hop, or are you familiar with it?
I'm familiar with it, yeah.
Right.
But I don't
so
use
it basically connects to your different social media and your photos and stuff. And then it gives you on this day, and it shows you all the things you've posted over the years on this day.
Yeah.
And today I was looking at mine, and it showed me a post I made, I think it was last year at this time, and it was around start with why. So yes, I am absolutely in line with you on that. And I really do believe that's where it all begins, because you got to know why you're doing it to begin with, because it's not as easy as everybody thinks to get into podcasting. And there's a lot of moving parts in it. And if you get caught up in those parts, which is easy to do, and you get frustrated or you forgot this step and you got to go back and you're getting mad and, oh, why am I doing this podcast in the first place? This is ridiculous. And it starts with why. You got to remind yourself, why are you doing this? What is your purpose? Who are you trying to help? And those kinds of things, when you can reconnect with them, it doesn't make the challenges go away. It makes them easier to deal with, because you have that North Star, that guide to remind you, this is the reason I'm doing this. This is why I'm going through all this crap right now, because I am here to serve. I am here to do X.
Exactly. Yeah. That is so beautifully put. I love that. And would you say that that would be one of the most important factors behind having a clear vision for what you're trying to create and your show overall?
Yeah, I think that's really, honestly, like Simon Sinek says, that is where it all begins in anything, right? I think everything gets a little bit easier, or you can get through the challenges a lot easier if you can stay connected with your purpose for whatever that project is, that podcast is, that business is, that relationship, right? It all comes back to, why am I in this? Why am I doing this? And yeah, I think that's really the factor when you're getting started in a podcast. Yeah.
Okay, I love that. And we've talked a little bit about this in our room that you. I know, we're all there. We're all there every single morning, but really you lead our path forward every single morning. And it is not the same without you in there. So it definitely, you are definitely really onto something there with that. But for our listener right now, just in case you didn't know, Marc has led up, essentially took over a Clubhouse room a year and a bit ago now, right? And every single morning, there's a bunch of moderators. There's, I think, 8 of us now.
Something like that.
Something
Yeah.
like that. And we meet every single Monday to Friday at 7 a.m. Eastern time. And we talk about podcasting. We talk about all things podcasting related. And what I love about this is some of the rooms are more technical, but also some of them are a little bit more on this mindset train or track, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And so we've actually talked about this a little bit recently, was the idea of starting with why and starting with purpose and that podcasting mindset. And what came up in that room was really interesting to me because there were some people who had said, I don't actually think that it's starting with a why, or like it's not really important to be rooted in that. But I think that it really has a big impact on your mindset and how you're going to show up for yourself and for your show if you constantly are remembering why you're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Not to exhaust the topic of starting with your why, but
well, I mean, we are at the start here, and yeah, I think that's a great place to establish this conversation when we talk about mindset. So yeah, I don't mind at all that we we beat this down until we're ready to move on. Yeah.
I love it. Okay, so with that in mind, though, let's talk a little bit about some of the challenges, I want to say, for a lack of a better word, that you see podcasters either sometimes create for themselves and also sometimes just fall into when it comes to the mindset work around podcasting and showing up and being consistent. We can even touch on that consistency piece.
Yeah, I think probably the number one mistake that a new podcaster makes is they, in all of the content they put out, they tend to make it too much about themselves. Right? It's the focus is on me, and a great way to spot check yourself for this is to go back and look at things like your social media posts when you're promoting a new episode. Right? Count how many times you say things like I, me, etc. I'm so excited for this new episode. I can't wait to share this new episode with you. I just had a great interview with Simona. I can't wait for you. All of these things, we get it. You're excited. And I hate to be blunt, but nobody cares yet. Right? They don't care that you're excited. The whole purpose why you're putting this up on social media is to get other people excited and other people to care. So instead of telling them that they're going to love it and that you're excited about it, tell them why. Go back to the why again, right? Tell them why they would be excited. Show them the reasons, right? So if after this interview, I know you well enough to know you're going to find some nuggets in this conversation and you're going to share the nuggets, right? And you're not afraid to share the information right now. You're not afraid that, oh, if I share it now, then then they're not going to want to hear it later. No, the idea is to tease it, and then people are going to come for more. They're going to be like, wow, this was really a moving piece of content that gets me excited. I want to hear more of it. And then they're going to go and find that episode and press play. So, so try to take yourself out of the equation and constantly remember you're doing this for your audience. You're doing this for that one person on the other end that you're trying to help make a difference, right? That is definitely, I think, the number one thing that not just new podcasters make. I think even seasoned podcasters sometimes make that mistake too.
Absolutely agree with you. I absolutely agree with you. And this is one of the things that I was talking about too a couple weeks ago. I did a free masterclass for launching your podcast. And one of the key things that I had said in there was making sure that you are aware of the language that you're using. So even language to help people make them feel like a little bit more included. You know what I mean? Instead of saying you guys, you all, you this, you that, it's like, just you. I'm excited for you to be here. Like that sounds so much more special and so much more truthful than, I'm so excited for all of you guys to be here today. It's like, who is all of you guys? Who are you all?
And then this takes me to some of the challenges, because some people will then say to me, yeah, but you also tell me, Mark, that I'm supposed to be relatable and that people want to connect with me as the host. And, people come for the content, but stay for the host. That's a common quote that we hear sometimes in our room on Clubhouse. And I agree with that. And I think that the way to do this is by sharing relatable stories with them within your content. So if you're, for example, I'll be very authentic with you for a moment. I have lately felt very challenged to put up new content on social media. Just not feeling it lately, right? And if I were to do a podcast episode about struggling with new episodes, I'd probably dive in to sharing what I'm going through right now, because the listener can then put themselves in your shoes. They can say, wow, this guy gets me. And then they're going to want to keep coming back and listening, or they're going to want to hear the advice that follows. How did he get through that? Right? That is the way that you connect with your audience, by sharing stories that they can relate to, whether they're your own or someone else's. But if you want them to connect with you, share as much as you can about yourself and what you're going through as it relates to them.
As it relates to podcasting.
That's
no,
right.
I'm just kidding.
I did that on purpose.
I was like, but do you know where you are right now? It's like that line, like, do you know where your children are? Anyways, Okay, sorry, I digress. No, I completely agree with you. And I think that is a really, really, really important point. And I think that it can keep you stuck sometimes, wondering and worrying about, what do I share? What do I not? What am I comfortable putting out there? What am I not? What will people think? What will they not think? And ultimately, at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter. Whatever you share, it has to be in alignment with who you are as a human being, because you never want to overshare something that you're not ready to talk about, of course. And also, I would argue that that's one of the pieces that could potentially bring you to a place of not being consistent or not feeling good enough to show up and do your show. And I say this because we can put a lot of conditions around the type of content we need to create, how we need to show up, when we need to show up, what we need to do. You know what I mean? Like all those different pieces that it can really, self-sabotage a little bit what you're creating. And I will caveat this. I want to hear your perspective on this, but I also will caveat this. I want to give you this perspective too. I was on a coaching call. I'm in a mastermind group, and I was on a coaching call this morning, and we had a guest speaker in the room, and he was just amazing. And he told us all to tell me something that you're going through right now, something that's really hard for you right now, whatever. So everyone gave their examples. And what he kind of netted it out to was this fear. Like everyone had this underlying fear. And essentially, I'm going to butcher it completely because I'm not him, and he said it so eloquently and beautifully. But essentially, the idea is that it's not that the fear isn't real. It is real. But it's more of the experience that you've had with that particular emotion in the past related to how you may have showed up in the past. Does that make any sense?
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, it's basically what happens is your brain gets programmed based on a certain situation that you've been in. And what happens is your brain says, okay, so when that happens or something like it happens, I am to react like this. So I'm totally in line with that theory for sure. I don't know if I don't have anything else I can expand on. I agree with it wholeheartedly.
No, I love that. I love that so much. I think it's really key too, because when it comes to this space, when it comes to podcasting, when it comes to production, and even when it comes to pod fade, it's easy to give up on ourselves, and it is easy to give up on the bigger purpose, which is why we're having this conversation today, to remind you how important it is to stay in your purpose. But I want to talk a little bit about the consistency piece. And I want to talk a little bit about like the patience that might need to come with podcasting. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I think that first, when people hear the word consistency, they go,
no, I'm just kidding.
What's that? Yeah, they might.
Run away.
Because they may go immediately to a generic definition of what that means, or maybe what that means to them. So they hear consistency and they think it means, every day, every week. And for the most part, I think you and I both would agree a podcast is going to be more effective when it comes to reach and growth if you're doing it every week and maybe even every day, but that can be challenging. But I think that the challenge that they want to overcome is the idea of what's consistency to you. What can you handle? And then stay with that, make that commitment to it, and then be consistent about it. So if you don't think you can do a podcast every single week, okay. But if you think you really want to do a podcast, what can you do? Is it once a month? Is it twice a month? Great. And breaking that down into the episodes, it's the same thing. Then they'll think, well, I've got to be consistent. I've got to do an hour episode once a week, every week. No, you don't have to do it that way. If you want to commit to a 10-minute episode once a week, go for it. And then stay with it. Follow through on the promise you've made to yourself. Follow through on the promise that you made to your audience. Yep. And that's all it takes. That's all that consistency is in my book. It's picking your path and staying on it and following through on it every day, week, month, whatever that looks like to you.
Beautiful. I love that. And you talked a little about their audience, and I wanted to dive into this as well, because I think, and I know this is true for myself, it's actually one of the biggest reasons why I put my Happiness Happens podcast on a hiatus for so long, which was almost a year long. And it's back now, by the way, in case you want to go check it out.
I know it's
but
back.
It's one of the reasons why I was on a hiatus for so long with this show, was because I felt like there was nobody listening. Like, even though I could see the downloads and I could see that there were people there, and I could see every single week that the numbers were doing well, to me, it just still felt like there was nobody there, because I never heard from my audience. I never heard from my listeners. And we talk a lot about this in our Clubhouse room as well. And we are going to do an episode on this social audio side. It's going to be our last one of our series. So if this is the first one you're listening to, we will get into that as well and talk more about it and the power in that. And so anyways, I digress on that point. But what I was going to say is, what's super important to remember is that we don't always know who we're impacting with the message. You just got to show up for the message.
Yeah.
And then people will start to tell you, and will start to reach out, and will start to, maybe give you that validation that you might be looking for. But if someone was to ask you, Marc, I just don't feel like anyone cares. I just don't feel like anyone is listening. I don't feel like anyone is, resonating with my content. What would you share with them to help shift their perspective a little bit?
First, I would probably remind them, or maybe introduce to them, the idea, when we think about radio and when people call in to a radio station to be on the air, right? Maybe they want, whatever the reason is, they're calling in, they want to talk to the DJ on the air. The truth is that I think it's even less than this, but just to be safe, I think it's only around 10% of the people that are listening to the radio show actually make that phone call to call into the radio station and to be on the air. So people are very passive when they're listening or watching a podcast. And so you have to accept that. You have to understand that. And unless you're doing it live, you really don't have any way of knowing until after the episode publishes how many people got their hands on it or their ears and eyes on it. So I recommend to people the one thing I ask is, do you ever ask your audience to engage with you? And oftentimes the answer is no, or the answer is, well, I do it on social media. And that's great. I encourage you to encourage engagement on social media. And why not do it on your own podcast? If that's the place you want people to gravitate to, if that's your baby, then on the podcast, engage with your audience. Pretend that you have your ideal audience member right across from you and you're talking to them, and ask them things like basic things. Where are you listening to right now? Right? And if you have to, make up something a little bit to get it more engaging, right? It's like, I just heard from one of my listeners last week, and they told me they're from Australia, and I was blown away that they're from Australia. I'm curious, where are you listening from? I would love to hear. Send me an email, drop me a DM. Encourage the two-way communication, because if you don't, then they may be assuming you never want to hear from them, that all you want is for them to consume your content. So give them reasons to reach out to you, whether they're very simple like that, because more people are going to be very much more quick to open up to you about where they're listening from than maybe something much more deep about their, maybe, if you're doing a relationship podcast and you're asking people, reach out to me if you're cheating on your husband. It's like, no, I am not going
I
to
will
necessarily
not.
volunteer that information, right? So give them some softballs. Or the other thing I suggest is to give the either or question, right? So, you could, maybe you digress for a moment during your podcast and you get into a quick conversation about your favorite ice cream flavor. Okay. It's like, I love chocolate. I can't believe anybody else would not love chocolate. I can't believe those people that like vanilla, right? And I'm curious, what do you like, right? And put it out there for people that, give them those softball questions so that they can engage. And you'll find it's going to take some time sometimes, because like I said, if radio's 10% of the audience, then you're probably only going to get about that too with your podcast. So be patient, but keep putting out those kinds of calls and you will eventually hear from people. That's definitely the easiest and cheapest way to start creating some engagement with your podcast audience.
I love that. And then in turn, it's going to make you feel like you're being heard and that you're being listened to and people care about what you're creating. And depending on what your love language is, that could be a big deal. Like that is the difference, for someone to either continue creating whatever they're creating or not, right? Yeah. I have 2 follow-up questions for you. Well, actually, one is a question and one is a really quick thought. The first, chocolate or vanilla? I need to know.
Chocolate. Every time.
Oh, thank God. No, I'm just I was about to be like, Mark, we can't finish this series. So sorry. I'm joking. If you're listening, tell us.
Eat chocolate.
Let us know. It's chocolate. More specifically, dark chocolate. Maybe with a little sea salt in there. Some caramel.
I'm with you.
I love it. And then, as you were talking about the radio story, I remember one time, and this is actually before my husband and I started dating. I had met him, okay? And I was like, who is this person? I was like, okay, interesting. I was like, who is this guy? Like, whatever. I was like, what is this? What is this? And you know me, I'm a pretty spiritual person. So, and I have been for years, okay? So we met when we were 22 and 21. And so I must have been, just turned 22. I'm older. Anyways, so I was listening to the radio and they had this psychic on the radio. And I was like, they were like, we're opening up the lines to listener questions. And I was like, I'm going to be calling in and I need to talk to this psychic. And that's exactly what I did. I called in. I literally was like the first one through on the line. I bet you nobody else probably called in because nobody likes being called out by a psychic, right? Anyways, I digress. But yeah, I'm that person that tries to call.
For some reason, that made me think the other thing is that when you do get that listener or viewer to reach out and they do answer that question, or maybe they randomly reach out and tell you how grateful they are that you're doing your podcast, right? Then A, always respond, right? Yes. And B, continue the conversation. Reach out a week or 2 later. Hey, I put out a new podcast. Would love to get your feedback on it. What do you think of that episode? Right? If you want people to engage with you, keep the engagement going. And once you've got somebody who has taken the time to reach out, that's a person who's not going to be terribly shy to talk to you again the next time. Exactly. And now you've got a way to connect with them directly. That will go a long way for you if you do that.
I love that. That's really great. And I want to end on this thought here because we have so much more to talk about in so many different little pockets of the podcasting industry. So our series together is actually a little bit different than some of the other series that I've done on my show so far, because we've stuck with one topic specifically for the 4 episodes and really, gone in deep on that. But when you and I were talking about our series together, there's so many incredible things that you are very well versed in. And I wanted to make sure that those different pieces made it onto this podcast because I thought it was really important. So obviously we needed to start with the mindset side. And then next, we are actually going to be talking 2 episodes about AI and how to integrate it and use it with your podcast. We're going to talk on one episode about the actual creation process. And then on the other episode, we're talking about the content creation and then the marketing side of it. So I'm really excited. And then we're going to talk about social audio as well. So I'm stoked.
I'd also, when we get into that AI stuff, I'd also like to get into the ethical side of using AI. I know we
Yep.
recently talked about it in our clubhouse room,
Absolutely.
and I think it's a discussion that's necessary moving forward for any industry. But
Yep.
yeah, I would love to dig into that with you too.
Okay, yes, we are headed there. So on that note, I'm going to ask you one more question, but I will plug this right now. If you want to get access to all 4 of these episodes, you can actually join us over on Patreon, because all of the episodes get released at the beginning of the month, so you can binge all the content. And then you don't have to wait. You don't have to wait for all the episodes. But if you're listening to this one by one, I'm still grateful for you. And I know Marc is too. So
Absolutely.
amazing. The link for that is in the show notes. Okay, so my last question that I have to ask you, Marc, and this relates to the mindset side, and I think it's like a really nice way to bring all of what we talked about together to a close. One of the things that I hear about often is the idea of podcast downloads, if you will. And the mindset game that gets played with, are enough people listening to my show? How many people are listening to my podcast? Why am I only getting 20 downloads? Why am I only getting 50 downloads, or 200 downloads, or 300 or 500, whatever the number is? What do you say to that?
One of the things, I actually just had a conversation about this with one of my longest running clients since I started my business. And she was getting to a point where she's just feeling like, why am I doing this? Right. Because she feels like I'm not reaching enough people. Right. It's not necessarily that she wanted a lot of people because she thinks that's the way to make a lot of money with your podcast. She genuinely wants to reach as many people as possible with her message. And first of all, it's funny because I notice this a lot. People don't connect with the fact that with their growth, like she has absolutely grown. When we look back to 3 or so years ago when she started, I mean, she's probably getting 3 or 4 times the amount of downloads she did when she started, right? So that's one. It's pay attention to your growth, pay attention to how far you've come, whether it's in the numbers or maybe it's even with your quality of your content and how far you've come, because as that improves, I do believe your audience will grow as well, as it sounds better, feels better, etc. And but the thing that I told her is, she's getting a few hundred downloads per episode, several hundred, right? And I said to her, if you fill up a room, let's just say it's 500. If you fill up a room every week in person with 500 people, how would you feel? Would you feel the same way? Would you feel like it's not worth it to you to do this? Just because you can't see them and you can't hear them in the room with you, they are in the room with you, and you are helping hundreds of people every week. And so it's a perspective thing. It can be a little bit of a mind F for you when you are in a room by yourself speaking and wondering if anybody can hear you. But the truth of the matter is, even if it's 20 people, I would be thrilled to know I could fill a room every time, 20, 30 people, no problem, like that. And I'd be excited about it. I'd come home from that thinking, wow, that was great. People are actually interested in me and my message. And so it's putting it into perspective, remembering that, there are people on the other side, and serve those people, focus on them. And the more you focus on them, then the more people they're going to tell about it, and the more you're going to grow.
I love that. Thank you so much for giving us that perspective. I couldn't agree more. And it is a question that I get all the time. I get it from my clients, and I get it in my DMs all the time. And it's so disheartening too at the same time, because it's like, don't let the numbers distract you from the ultimate message and the ultimate purpose and the ultimate mission. The right people are going to find you. They always will. And I know that's a hard place to like sit in. And it's also a hard place to get out of, because I have been there, and I have been in the exact same spot. I know you probably have too, over the years of podcasting. And it's a big deal, but you got to give yourself a little grace, right?
Absolutely. And remind yourself, put it into perspective, right? You're not alone when you're podcasting. And if it's 10 people, 100 people, 1,000 people, those are real people on the other side, and focus on them, and everything else falls into place after that.
I love that. Thank you so much, Marc, for being on this first episode of my podcast. It was amazing.
I'm enjoying it. Looking forward to the next one.
I know it's not just me that thinks this conversation was so powerful and so impactful. I learn so much from these conversations, and I hope that you are too. If you have, please leave a review of the podcast wherever you're listening to the show. And be sure to check out the show notes for all of the resources that we talked about throughout this conversation. I want to highlight two very important resources for you really quick. The first one is Marc's Chat GPT prompt guide. And then the second is the link to his Next Gen Podcaster community membership. So you need to go and check out those two links. They are in the show notes below. And if you want to connect with Marc, you can do so on Instagram, you can do so on Clubhouse, and you also can on his website. All of the links are in the notes below. Thanks so much for tuning into this episode. Share it with someone you know needs to hear it. And let's get into our next conversation, shall we?